Have you ever wondered what happens to a soul when the world simply forgets? Brooklyn, New York. Winter. The city that never sleeps seemed to have closed its eyes to him. On the hard, cold sidewalk of some random street, where hurried footsteps ignore invisible faces, Bruce, a man of just 40 years old, lay still, clutching himself as if trying to hold himself together. Cars zoomed by. Phones rang. Cafes filled with people. But there, amidst all that motion, was a pause, a human being frozen in time, in space, and in the memory of those who chose not to see. Bruce was just another silhouette on the margins of society. Another story no one wanted to hear, but something pulsed within him. Something he couldn't even name. It wasn't hope is for those who still believe. It was more like a quiet stubbornness, an inner whisper that said, "It's not over yet." A nearly faded echo of dignity, buried beneath layers of rejection, exhaustion, and silence. As you read this, maybe you're out there, on the other side of the screen, in a moment where everything feels lost. Or maybe you know someone like that. And so, before you go on, subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because the story you're about to hear is more than a life turnaround. It's living proof that a human being can be reborn, even when everything around them seems determined to bury them. Bruce didn't fall overnight. The descent was slow, dragged out, almost imperceptible. It was like sinking in the quicksand of reality. First, he lost his job. Then, the rent came due. The food ran out, and the people vanished. Each day was a battle between pride and need. Sleeping on a park bench, washing with a water bottle in an alley. Hunger at first, hurt. Then it became a constant companion, a reminder that he was still alive. Barely, but on that particular night, Brooklyn felt crueler. The wind cut like a razor. Bruce clutched a torn blanket to his chest, as if it could stop the world from piercing through him. His eyes were open, but they saw nothing anymore. Just the memory of what once was. A son, a brother, a man. Now just a shadow, a ghost, a silence. Across from him, the glowing sign of a diner still shone. Warm light, happy voices inside, the smell of fries. Cruel irony. Bruce had worked at one of those chains before, worn that uniform, smiled behind a counter, even when his world was crumbling inside. And now not even a food order remained. Just a glass window separating two worlds, one of those with choices, and one of those who only wait for the day to pass. But that night, something different happened. Not a miracle, not divine intervention, just a glance, a brief moment of eye contact with someone inside, a fraction of a second that Bruce would never forget, because it was there, in that silent moment, that a seed was planted. An invisible seed, buried deep in an exhausted heart. You'll understand this by the end, but for now, just feel, because it's in the silence of pain that change begins to take root. And when it blooms, you'll want to be here to see it. But before the light comes the darkest night, and Bruce's was only just beginning. The bottom of the pit never comes with a warning. No sign, no sound, just silence, the kind of silence that screams inside the soul. The ground Bruce walked on every day was the same one that rejected him. Brooklyn's sidewalks felt harder when he walked barefoot, but nothing was as sharp as the sidelong glances. No one needed to say anything. His hunched body was answer enough for a world that ignored him. Hunger shaped his days, and cold, his nights. Bruce learned quickly that living on the streets isn't just about physical endurance. It's a psychological war. Every step was an attempt not to crumble. Every day was a silent plea for help, choked by shame. There were no more mirrors, no more names. He didn't even know who he was anymore. He just existed, or almost. The cold invaded his bones like a constant reminder that life hung by a thread. His clothes, dirty and torn, no longer held back the wind. His fingers stiffened. His face burned. Sometimes it felt like he was saying goodbye to his own body, piece by piece. Park benches became beds, doorways, roofs. The sky, the only witness to his pain. And yet, the worst wasn't the cold, nor the hunger. It was the invisibility. He begged for help with his eyes, sometimes with words, but mostly with silence. And that silence was exactly what people avoided most. Once, sitting near a subway station, he reached out his hand, not for money, for bread, a simple piece of bread. A woman averted her gaze as if he were a threat. Another man muttered something and kicked his empty cup onto the ground. The sound of plastic hitting concrete echoed louder than any scream. Bruce didn't cry anymore. His tears had dried up weeks ago. You cry in the beginning, when you still have the strength for it. Now, he just lay there, waiting, not for a savior, but for an end. And that end nearly came. It was an especially cruel night. Below zero temperatures. Bruce couldn't find a spot under the overpass. Others were already there. He curled up in the alley where he kept his bags with the few belongings he had left. An old t-shirt, a broken lighter, a letter he'd written years ago and never had the courage to send. His body trembled, but his mind was calm, because in that moment, he felt it might be his last night. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to not see the abandonment, not see the darkness, not see reality. But then, something curious happened. A sound, a faint sound, a meow, a cat, dirty, starving, trembling, curled up beside him. Bruce looked at the creature, and for a second, something inside him broke. Or maybe reignited, because in that moment, he didn't see himself as a victim anymore. He saw himself as shelter. Even in that state, he was shelter for something alive, and that hurt. With trembling hands, he picked up the cat, tucked it under his tattered coat, and held it close. And in that embrace, Bruce felt for the first time in months something close to love. Maybe not for himself, but for a life that trusted him. And that was the first thread of humanity that began to pulse again. The next day, with the cat still cradled in his arms, he stood up. No direction, no energy, but standing. And that was more than he'd managed in a long time. He started walking, even without a destination, even without knowing why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that seed, slowly sprouting deep within. But one thing was certain. The pain was still there. The shame, the hunger, the fear. It all still existed. But now, there was also a spark. A tiny ember. Bruce didn't know it, but the hell he was trudging through was about to give way. And when the whole world turns its back on you, sometimes it's in the gaze of a stranger that fate decides to whisper your next chance. The first step is never glorious. It doesn't come with epic music or a beam of light from the sky. Sometimes, the first step comes from a need so basic, so instinctual, that it doesn't even feel like progress. Bruce didn't wake up one day determined to change his life. He didn't have a brilliant plan, nor enough courage. What he had was hunger. It was a gray morning. The heavy sky mirrored exactly what Bruce felt inside. He walked with the cat still pressed to his chest, protecting the small creature as if it were all the good left in the world. The backpack on his shoulders held nothing but damp papers, rags, and lost memories. But that day, need spoke louder. Near the subway station, he saw a small poster taped to a wall. Cleaning job, night shift, daily pay, no experience required. The paper was torn, dirty, barely legible. But those words, they shone like light. He hesitated, thought it would be pointless, that no one would hire someone like him. But for some reason he couldn't explain. He wrote down the number. That same day, with the little dignity he had left, he asked to borrow a phone at a convenience store. The clerk hesitated, grimaced, but eventually gave in. Bruce called. The voice on the other end was direct, curt. Show up at 7 p.m. If you're late, you're out. He arrived at 6:40 p.m. The warehouse was old, damp, reeking of paint and dust. The cleaning was heavy, industrial, far from any dignity. But there, among mops, buckets, and trash bags, Bruce felt alive. The work burned his back, cut his fingers, exhausted his muscles. But for the first time in a long time, he felt there was a purpose, a rhythm, a chance. In the early days, he slept wherever he could, sometimes on an emergency staircase, sometimes in the back of the warehouse. He didn't complain, didn't demand, just gave thanks for not freezing out in the open. The pay came in cash, a few crumpled bills, but each one felt like gold in his hands. He bought bread, shared it with the cat, a new blanket, a secondhand coat, and little by little, the weight of the streets began to lift, but not without pain. In the third week, he was let go for arriving late, just 5 minutes. The bus had been delayed. Bruce begged, cried, but no one cared. Once again, the ground was pulled out from under him. He thought about giving up, thought about surrendering for good. But something inside him wouldn't let go. That seed was still alive. Stubborn, with nowhere to go, he walked to a diner where he'd once eaten leftovers from the trash months before. There, he saw an old co-worker who still remembered him from when he waited tables, years ago. The man looked Bruce in the eyes, not with pity, with memory, and said, "You're still here. You haven't disappeared." That phrase echoed in his mind. "You're still here." And that's when it clicked. Bruce realized that surviving in itself was already an act of resistance. And more than that, it was a declaration of worth. Even without a home, even without a steady job, even without direction, he was still here. And if he was, then he could still change. He decided to keep looking. For days, he sought out small jobs, handing out flyers, washing windows, car wash gigs. He got dozens of no's, but eventually, a yes came. A car wash owner needed help and offered 2 days of work. Bruce accepted on the spot, and he gave it his all. It was at that car wash that he first heard someone talk about real estate investments. A customer was on the phone while waiting for his car. Bruce listened from a distance, like someone hearing a foreign language. But those words, mortgage, rent, return, equity, lit a spark. That night, he walked to a public library, one of the few that still let him in. He went straight to the finance section, picked up an old book about buying a first home with little money. He read it in silence, read it with hunger, read it like someone drinking water after crossing a desert. The turnaround wasn't an explosion. It was a slow shift in direction, one step, then another, and another. Each one firmer than the last, each one more determined. Bruce wasn't a winner yet. He still slept poorly, still ate little, still carried scars from the streets, but now he had a direction. He had purpose. And that was everything, because sometimes the greatest revolution happens in silence. And when the world least expects it, the one everyone buried begins to rise. Building a life from scratch isn't like climbing a mountain. It's like trying to build a ladder while already in midair. Bruce had no one to support him, no capital, no degree. What he had was something no one could take away, a hunger for change. Not the hunger that eats at your stomach, but the one that burns inside, the one that pushes you forward, even when everything around you says to give up. After months of odd jobs, Bruce managed to save just over $800, hard-earned money, literally. He washed cars under the scorching sun, scrubbed graffiti off walls, helped elderly folks carry groceries, all without complaint. Every folded bill in his pocket was like a seed planted in hope. But he knew this was just the beginning. It was there, among makeshift tables and iron stalls, that Bruce learned the game of value. He bought broken items at thrift stores, fixed them with his own hands, and resold them on Saturdays. One day, a man bought 3 refurbished fans for $60 and asked, "Got any more?" Bruce didn't, but he lied and said yes. The next day, he scrambled to find more. He learned, firsthand, what demand meant. That planted another idea. What if he could scale this? With the money from sales, he bought a used bicycle. With it, he started delivering flyers in commercial neighborhoods. It didn't take long for him to become the reliable delivery guy for a small Thai restaurant. The owner liked his work ethic and offered him a shift in the kitchen. More money, more learning. At night, he still studied. He borrowed books on personal finance, construction, and anything he could find about the real estate market. He discovered that dilapidated houses were sold for dirt cheap, and investors bought them, fixed them up, and resold them. The term, house flipping. Bruce didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. There was an opportunity. He started attending open meetings of local investors. He'd show up sweating, poorly dressed, and sit in the back. Just listened, took notes, absorbed. Sometimes he was ignored. Other times, treated like an intruder. But he didn't stop. One of those meetings changed everything. A veteran investor approached him. "I see you here every month. You learning or just pretending?" Bruce answered with steady eyes, "I'm preparing to change my life." His sincerity struck the man. He offered Bruce a test. Paint a house he'd just bought. Fair pay if the job was done well. Bruce accepted. He spent days there, sweating, learning, executing. And he did more than asked. He cleaned the yard, fixed a gate, painted extra windows no one had requested. When he finished, the investor not only paid him, but invited him to help with the full renovation. Bruce became a laborer on the project, then a supervisor. Within months, he understood the entire process: buy, renovate, sell. With each flipped house, he earned a bigger commission, and instead of spending, he saved every penny. One day, with nearly $10,000 saved, he made his first offer on a condemned house. Small, dirty, forgotten. No one wanted it, but Bruce saw potential. He negotiated directly with the owner, offered everything he had, and arranged to pay the rest in installments with a verbal agreement. The former owner agreed. Bruce slept inside the house the first night. No electricity, no water, but with a smile on his face. For 2 months, he renovated it with his own hands. Painted, replaced plumbing, sanded every wall, cleaned the roof, alone. He recorded every part of the renovation with his old phone, posting the videos on a small channel he'd created, just to document. And that's how, without realizing it, he began building not just a house, but a brand. When the renovation was done, he put the house up for sale. With the help of a local realtor, the sale happened. Fast and profitable. Bruce cleared $15,000 in profit. For the first time, he tasted what it was to build something from nothing. It wasn't luck anymore. It wasn't just survival. It was creation. It was strategy. But he didn't stop. He bought another house, and another. In just over 2 years, Bruce had renovated 17 properties. And more than that, he'd become a reference among local small-scale investors. They started seeking him out, asking for tips, partnerships, help. So Bruce founded his first formal company, New Roots Properties, a symbolic name. New roots, new beginning. Because when someone who came from nothing decides not to stop, the whole world sooner or later has to stop and listen. What separates a dreamer from a doer is silent consistency, and Bruce was about to go from survivor to unstoppable force. His company, New Roots Properties, grew like a tree born in the desert, against all predictions, against all odds. In 3 years, Bruce was no longer just a former homeless man flipping houses. He was the most talked about name among Brooklyn's small investors, and that drew attention. It was a modest article, but its impact was profound. The headline read, "From rock bottom to the top, the man who built his freedom with his own hands." The story went viral. Bigger newspapers picked it up. Business websites began telling his story. And with that came new invitations, speaking engagements, mentorships, events. But Bruce declined most of them. His focus was still on building. He hadn't reached where he wanted to be. In the 4th year, one of the houses Bruce renovated was appraised at over $500,000. The appreciation was staggering. He'd bought the property for just $90,000. When the sale closed, Bruce crossed the $1 million mark in net worth. But when the realtor called with the news, Bruce didn't celebrate with shouts. He went silent. The phone slipped from his hand. He knelt and cried. He cried for the years in the cold, the hunger, the rejection, the boy who was once invisible to the world. And now he was seen. He was remembered. He was someone. But Bruce never forgot. With every milestone, he kept a photo of himself sleeping on the streets as his phone's lock screen. It was his anchor, his reminder, not out of ego, but to never let arrogance replace gratitude. Bruce created a housing reintegration fund. He helped homeless people find work and rent their first homes. But more than donating money, he gave his presence. He sat with them, listened, advised, said, "I am you," just a few steps ahead. At one of those meetings, he met a young man named Malik, 19 years old, no family, no home, but with the same eyes Bruce had years ago. Bruce didn't hesitate. He hired the kid, first as an assistant, then as a direct apprentice. Malik would become his right-hand man, and a symbol that transformation isn't about luck. It's about opportunity. The company grew, expanded to other cities. Bruce diversified. He entered the modular construction business, developed low-cost housing, created a social rental project, and every venture set aside a portion of its income for community initiatives. It was as if he was giving back, house by house, what life had once taken from him. On that stage, in front of hundreds of people, Bruce said, "I'm not a miracle. I'm not a genius. I'm just someone who was once stepped on and decided not to turn into dust." The auditorium fell silent. The audience wept, and there, he understood. The greatest achievement wasn't the money. It was dignity. It was proving that shattered lives can still bloom. That rock bottom can be fertile ground. Then came national recognition. Bruce was featured in magazines like Forbes, Entrepreneur, and Business Insider, but he turned down several cover stories. He said his story wasn't about glamour. It was about truth. In his office, a phrase painted on the wall sums it all up. "The streets tried to kill me, but they also taught me to build a bridge." Bruce crossed that bridge, and now he's helping others cross it too. But what Bruce built goes beyond properties, because the true legacy is the one that endures even after the last house is sold. When a story is forged in pain, struggle, and real overcoming, it carries something no number can measure: soul. And Bruce's soul was now alive not only in him but in every person his journey touched. Because a man who once had nowhere to sleep was now giving shelter to hundreds. Bruce created the Key to Life Institute, a free educational program for at-risk youth focused on 3 pillars: emotional intelligence, financial literacy, and professional training. The classrooms were simple, the resources basic, but the energy was real. The eyes were attentive, the questions sharp. Bruce didn't sell promises. He delivered tools, and that's where he smiled the most. There he saw fragments of himself in every boy, every girl, dirt on their hands, pain in their chests, but light in their eyes. Bruce would often repeat, "It's not the place that defines you. It's what you decide to do with the pain it caused you." At one of those meetings, a teenage girl named Tanya stood up, tears in her eyes. She said, "I thought my story was over, but seeing yours, I realized it's only just beginning." Bruce swallowed his tears, because that was the real million. In less than 7 years, Bruce helped renovate over 80 properties, relocated entire families, turned abandoned lots into small community centers. But he never lost his simplicity. He still rode his bike to visit construction sites, still took notes in his old notebook, and still slept with the same thin blanket he used on the streets, as a reminder, as a ritual of gratitude. Once a reporter asked, "What would you say to the Bruce sleeping on the ground in Brooklyn if you could go back in time?" He answered without hesitation, "I'd tell him to hold on a little longer, because his pain will be the bridge to free others." Silence. That phrase became a mural, a tattoo, a rallying cry for social campaigns, because it was more than an answer. It was a universal truth: applause, medals, recognition. But Bruce looked at Malik and whispered, "You're proof it was worth it." The kid, now a man, was a partner in the company. He led projects, inspired other youth. The chain of transformation was in motion, and Bruce was just the first link. In his last televised interview, Bruce spoke directly to the camera. "If you're watching this from a dark place, know there's light, but you have to start, even if no one sees, even if no one believes, because the world only notices after you build." He ended with a shy smile. "And if I did it, so can you." This story isn't just about Bruce. It's about me. It's about you. It's about every forgotten soul, every buried dream, every discredited life that refuses to die. Because as long as there's breath, there's still a path. And now, if this story touched your heart, if it sparked something inside you, I invite you to be part of it. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like. Comment below what this journey stirred in you. Because when you share a story like this, you're not just spreading words, you're spreading hope. And hope, my friend, is the only thing that can turn the impossible into reality.